Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen, and in particular, a very warm welcome to our postgraduate students who are coming to our second of our postgraduate conferences run by the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences, Crossing Paths. It gives me great pleasure to say a few words at the beginning of today's meeting. A few words just on reflection about the importance that we place on our postgraduate community, and particularly the conversations that we have within our postgraduate community. I'll say a few words on those in just a moment, but before we do that, I've been handed a very important bit of paper by Joe, who's done a huge amount of work on behalf of the Institute in organising this conference. So before I go any further, I'd like to thank Jo and her team and others who've been involved in organising today's event. So what's really important, and most of the information is on this bit of information here. It tells you about the poster competition, the People's Prize, and the video opportunity. So if you haven't had a chance to read through that, please do so. What I'd really like to do is highlight the range of activities that are going on today. So you've got those programmes in your pack. In terms of the poster competition, the judges are looking for the best poster, and you can see what and you've all had a chance to look, and you will have a chance again in the next hour to look at those posters. The judges' prize, highly lucrative prizes of £100 and 2 times 25. So certainly for some of you, will make it worthwhile coming along today. And then the People's Prize. So this is a communication competition, and it's a slightly different challenge. The People's Prize will be awarded for communication, and we all take part in this. You should vote yourself personally for the person and poster from whom you have learnt most. So it's a real challenge, both for those who are communicating or those who are listening, to present your work in a way that communicates to somebody else in a really clear way, in an exciting way, and something that's really different for that individual. And that's really what the heart of this afternoon is. It's about crossing paths. It's taking a look at other people's work from their perspective and really understanding and embedding how that might affect us. So that's really what that competition is about. So once you've decided who has explained their work most clearly and really excites you, you should then go and vote for them. And you need to do that before 2 o'clock this afternoon by placing your ballot in the ballot box, which is at the entrance over there. And for there is a £50 prize and 2 prizes donated by the KPA, which include a meal for 2, including a bottle of wine. I'm not sure whether the KPA or the KPA president or president-elect are catering personally for that, but anyway, they're going to provide you a meal somehow as one of the prizes. So you've got the ballot papers in your pack, and you need to vote before 2 o'clock this afternoon. And then, in addition to that, we will be identifying the opportunity for groups to have their research catalogued through an interaction with marketing communications through a video opportunity. Now, that obviously won't take place this afternoon, but those selected will be asked to work with MAC in a short period of time in the coming weeks to make a short video of their research and the interdisciplinary nature of their research. So that competition is also taking place at the same time. So a lot going on. And of course there is the 3-minute thesis competition for presentation, and also some judges' prizes of £50 each. So there's actually quite a lot of prizes if I add them all up here. So if you won all of them, you'd actually go away rather rich at the end of this, but I assume we probably won't have one individual. So there is something for everybody. Even if you don't win any of the prizes, I really hope you enjoy this afternoon. I know everybody here is really looking forward to the diversity and wealth of knowledge exchange that we've got here. I'd just like to say a couple of very brief things just on drilling down a bit below all the frills of the prizes and everything else about why we're here this afternoon. It really is first and foremost about communicating your research as a researcher to other people. And I can't stress the importance of doing that, whether you're in the sciences or the social sciences, the arts, humanities, whatever area you're in. Communicating your research is absolutely key to who we are as academics and as researchers. We're all aware that we live in a society now where perhaps we begin to question the value of research. We begin to question the value of looking at problems in an analytical way and presenting solutions. And I guess a lot has been said in recent times about the reasons why sometimes research is not taken by the community as readily as we might hope it to be. And to a degree, it's easy to blame those outside and say, well, you don't understand, or surely you can see that the world is different from that. Actually, we bear that responsibility as much as those outside. And so communicating that research, communicating your ideas, particularly those ideas that cross disciplines, is a really important part. And it's not only something that we need to do well for our future careers, but I would actually reflect as postgraduate students, as academics, as researchers in our area, it's part of our duty and our responsibility to do that as part of wider society. I think the other challenge is also to ourselves personally remember that we have a responsibility to remain open-minded, to be open-minded. And again, a challenge to you today is have those conversations that are possibly the most challenging. Don't cluster around those groups that are comforting, where you recognise the molecules or you recognise the theory on the posters. Go and speak to somebody where you really don't grasp that. And you may even have some level of scepticism and think, well, that's all a bit woolly or fluffy, or that's all a bit detailed and molecular. Try and have those conversations and think about the commonalities that you have between you. So that's a real challenge for you today. Be open-minded in yourselves and remain open-minded as you progress through your postgraduate careers and also beyond in your wider careers. And don't be afraid on the basis of that, of then stepping up to the great challenges that face us. We know that some of the most groundbreaking changes we're seeing in society, the most groundbreaking changes in science and in arts and humanities and social sciences, happen at those boundaries where disciplines come together. And unless we also have the confidence to build those relationships with our colleagues in those areas, recognising that by ourselves we are unlikely to solve these big problems as individuals, but we need to work and collaborate together. But we also need to work and collaborate together in a way that's much, much wider, much bigger than we may even envisage in our wildest dreams. And there's fantastic examples of those if you look at some of the really big solutions and some of the really big problems that we face in the world today. So today is about equipping yourselves with this ability to do that, ability to think and really challenge yourself to build up networks, and hopefully networks that you can replicate and even build up today in terms of those networks of subjects and disciplines and people that you may take on in the future into your careers. So as well as the fun prizes, the fun posters and everything else that goes with today, please take that opportunity to challenge yourself as individuals and challenge others to communicate their science and their research to you. Okay, so I'm really enjoying. I'm really looking forward to enjoying having conversations with you this afternoon. I know you will with each other as well. So welcome to the conference, and it really gives me great pleasure to open this afternoon's conference. Before I do so, I'd like to, as well as acknowledging the thanks of the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences, Jo and her team, I'd like to say a special thanks to the KPA. The KPA's relationship with the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences and the wider university in general is really central to our strategy of building a community of postgraduate students where we can have activities like this. We can have fun activities as well, but also really put the academic at the heart of what we do at the university with postgraduate students, a real academic heart to that. And the KPA are really signed up to that. In fact, more than any other university I've been to, the KPA are the body that challenge us as academics, us as seniors management, to bring in that academic focus into what they're doing. And we are trying as much as we can to live up to the expectations which the KPA have. And it's a real pleasure to work with a body such as that, where students are really challenging us to, as part of their fun activities, also to think about the academic meaning of what a postgraduate association is. And so, with no further ado, I'd like, first of all, to thank Rob Meredith as current president of the KPA, for the support you've given myself as director of the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences, and wider in terms of your work with the KPA, and also to welcome and congratulate Ian Smith as the president elect of the KPA, who will be taking on this work as we go forward. And so I'd like to invite Ian to come up and say a few words on behalf of the KPA before we start. But from myself as Director of the Institute for Liberal Arts and Sciences, just thank you for coming today. Really enjoy this afternoon. Really take that opportunity to live up to the challenges that we've just been talking about. But also enjoy yourself, have fun, go away and win some of those prizes.
As has been said, so my name's Ian, I'm your current Vice President, and as of last night I've officially been elected to be your President for the next academic year. So first of all, thank you very much. So for those of you who might not have entirely come across us and don't quite know who we are and what we do, the KPA is an independent students' union solely dedicated to postgraduate students here at Keele. Our work is focused on a range of activities, including advice and support, and trying to encourage the postgraduate community that you are all members of to grow and to develop here at Keele. And just two of the things that I'd like to pick out that we feel really highlight this. First of all is the KPA bursary. Having looked around some of the posters today and having had a little tip-off from Rob and Alison, I know some of you here have already applied and successfully been awarded a KPA bursary. The KPA bursary offers between £50 to £500 to support any activity which supplements your course and promotes your academic and professional development. And we have been very fortunate over the last few years to support many postgraduates in being able to attend things and achieve things that they might not otherwise have been able to do. If anybody here has been successfully awarded a KPA bursary, please do speak to other students here today and let them know about how it has helped you and how it could help them. It is a bursary solely here to help you guys, and we'd like to continue promoting that and continuing to support yourselves in doing what you would like to do to develop yourselves. The other thing that we would like to point out that we do for you is yesterday, some of you might have seen, we've launched our Bob Beattie Postgraduate Student of the Year Award. Bob Beattie was a regular here at Keele. He used to be a lecturer and was very well known at the KPA Clubhouse, and he provided a lot of informal support and counselling to many postgraduate students here at Keele. And we feel it's very fitting that we've decided to name our Postgraduate Student of the Year Award after him. This award will celebrate a postgraduate individual contribution to the community as a whole, in particular an excellent contribution, and there will be a cash prize attached to this of £1,000. We encourage you in the KPA to think of either yourself, if you'd like to nominate yourself, or anybody else in the postgraduate community you feel has provided an excellent contribution, has supported postgraduates, has put on events, or tried to encourage the social community that we have here at Keele for our postgraduates. If you're aware of anybody that you think is fitting and deserving of this award, then please do consider nominating them, because this is an opportunity to really sing and shout about how fantastic our postgraduate community here is at Keele. And you have until the 16th of May to submit those nominations. But finally, coming to the conference today, conferences like this are integral to postgraduate study. Whether this is your first time at a conference or whether you're a seasoned veteran and have been to quite a few, this is a great opportunity for you to be able to communicate the work that you have done. It is obviously incredibly important to be able to complete the fantastic research that you will get up to. But it is equally just, if not more important, to be able to communicate this work effectively to your colleagues and those outside of your discipline and outside of university life in itself. So with this in light, I really encourage you today to go around, explore all the posters, talk with your fellow postgraduates about the work that they've been doing. And if I was to set you a challenge, I'd say approach somebody in a discipline that is unrelated to your own and ask them questions about their work and walk away having learnt something new that you didn't know of. And hopefully that can help enlighten your own research and your work. And with that, I'd like to say thank you very much and enjoy the rest of the day.
Just to introduce myself, I'm David Amigoni and I'm Pro Vice-Chancellor for Research and Enterprise. Thank you for everything that you've been doing in terms of viewing the wonderful poster competition. Some wonderful material there, as I've said. One of the things, just to remind you, is the importance of voting for those competitions, and there is a box over there which Steve is working with at the moment. That's for the people's vote, so make sure you have voted for the posters. The 3-minute thesis. The 3-minute thesis is an academic competition developed by the University of Queensland, Australia, and its success has led to the establishment of local and national competitions in several countries, including this country. And so we are a particular iteration of, an expression of, the 3-minute thesis in this ILAS postgraduate conference. Now, the challenge is to present a compelling spoken presentation on your research topic to entertain and inform an academic but non-specialist audience. And being able to present your research to an audience who knows little or nothing about your area of study is, as this whole kind of conference exemplifies, I think, through its poster competition and now through the 3-minute thesis, a very important skill that all researchers need to develop. And so taking part in the 3-minute thesis competition will provide you with a valuable experience of explaining your research and its significance in an accessible and engaging way. What we're going to experience this afternoon is one heat of a number of heats that will build towards a kind of grand final 3-minute thesis competition at Keele, which takes place on the 20th of June at 6:30 p.m. So this is, as I say, one heat. There will be other heats going on in other parts of the university, but of course this, because it is the 3-minute thesis competition for the Crossing Paths conference, is an extremely important one, and good to see so many of you gathered here today to be part of it. One of the other things to point out to you as well is that you have a vote for this competition, a people's vote, whereas the poster competition gets its box in very demotic form. This is the box in which to record your people's vote for the 3-minute thesis competition. So it's just here on the table, so please do remember to vote for it. Just a few words very quickly about the rules of 3-minute thesis, just so you know what you're going to see. The rules are that you can have a single static PowerPoint slide, no slide transitions, animations or movement of any description, no additional electronic media, sound or video files are permitted, no additional props, costumes, musical instruments, laboratory equipment are permitted. It'd be difficult to get them up here, I'd have to say. Presentations are limited to 3-minute maximum, and competitors exceeding 3 minutes are disqualified. And you will see there on the screen that there is that candidates are going to be very rigorously kind of kept to that limit. Presentations are to be spoken word, so no poems, raps or songs. Presentations are to commence from the stage, and I will vacate this in a moment. I like this rule, actually. Presentations are considered to have commenced when a presenter starts their presentation through movement or speech. And I thought, oh, why distract? Of course, you could mime it, couldn't it? You could spend 3 minutes miming before you actually start speaking. And if you've got a well-developed audience, you might do very well out of that. And the decision of the adjudicating panel is final.
We are living in a new health society. In almost every aspect of our lives, we are faced with questions and decisions about health. Health has gone beyond the confines of healthcare system itself. Health includes wellness and exercise. It involves what one eats and drinks and how one sleeps. It is discussed in the fashion magazines and radio programs, on the TV, on the talk shows and radio programs as well. Policy documents asks us to become informed patients, active and engaged citizens, and empowered communities. But unfortunately, most of us do not have access to the necessary information and do not have the necessary skills to derive decisions for our health. These skills are the essence of health literacy. Research has shown better the health literacy, better the health outcomes. It is even more important within the perspective of chronic conditions that require self-management. Diabetes, one of the chronic conditions that requires management on daily basis. In the medication, healthy and balanced eating, be physically active, and monitoring of blood glucose level. In the UK, there are 4 million people living with this condition. And people from South Asian community, they are at higher risk of developing this condition as compared to the indigenous population. The complicated management of diabetes should not left just to the healthcare professional. There is need to target the resources towards the right direction in the prevention and treatment of diabetes. Health literacy is considered one of the non-clinical significant factors that can reduce complications associated with diabetes. That is the focus of my research. In this mixed method research, I conducted a face-to-face survey with 350 individuals, and result has shown. And after establishing this initial evidence, I went towards exploring that what are the particular needs in this community that needs to be considered. And it has shown there are certain aspects of health literacy that needs to be considered to improve self-management in this community. And after establishing, and particularly the last one, the distributed health literacy, that has shown that it is not just, health literacy is not just about individual skills. It is about the community resources that are also available in the community that can be used to better manage their diabetes. So, consideration of health literacy within the cultural perspective of a community enable us to bring the assets and reduce health inequalities in the UK and around the world. Thank you.
Arm and shoulder computer model is a powerful tool to understand structure and function, muscle and tendon, and also help the engineer to fit the design for disabled and people who need prosthesis. Measurements, the size and shape properties of muscle and tendon are the solid foundation of arm and shoulder computer model. And this data was collected from body after death cadaver. But unfortunately, it's time-consuming and it doesn't customize to each individual. Therefore, in the PhD thesis, we propose to evaluate this information automatically by using ultrasound image and advanced mathematical and computer method. In the PhD thesis, we designed and developed mathematical and computer method, and our work is as pipeline. It consists of 3 stages. After collection data from healthy volunteers, we started with the first stage is image enhancement. In this stage, in PhD thesis, we address the main limitation of ultrasound image, such as low contrast and noise, and then prepare to the next stage, image segmentation. Convert the many train level intensity into just 2 colors, white and black. Actually, this stage is challenge step because the interaction between the information of tendon and muscle. To prepare to the next stage is shape and size measurement. In this stage, we measure the area of irregular shape and circumference and other shape and size properties. As conclusion, shape and size properties of muscle and tendon now is possible, automatically evaluation, and this is closest step to final goal of building acceptable bespoke musculoskeletal model. Thank you very much.
What do a skulk of foxes and Kim Kardashian West have in common? For those of you who are familiar with Leicester City, they had what can only be described as a Cinderella season, overcoming odds of 5,000 to 1 and going on to win the English Premier League title. So low were their odds, in fact, Kim Kardashian West had a higher chance of becoming president of the United States than they did of winning the trophy. Now, teams such as Leicester attribute their success to their ability to keep their injury rates low. There's therefore within the literature a suggested relationship between performance and injury risk. One of the ways in which teams such as Leicester prevent injury is through a collection of measurements at the start of the season and exercise tests. So how big is the injury burden in football? Well, as many as 47% of professional footballers are forced to retire through injury. An outfield player can be expected to sustain 1 to 2 injuries throughout the competitive season, resulting in them being unavailable for one competitive game. We also know that if you develop injury, you are likely to develop further injury, and the more injuries you develop, the more injuries you are subsequently likely to develop. Therefore, it's within the interest of the players and the sports science and medical teams to try and keep injury rates low. My PhD was aimed at evaluating if current measurements taken at the start of the season are valid and if they predict injury throughout the season. One of the ways we did this is we compared a clinical exercise test called the FMS against a motion capture system, which you would have seen being used in things such as movie CGI. It can be used clinically to get things such as joint angles. We also looked at other characteristics that are associated with the players, such as body weight, body fat percentage, and how often they trained. And we followed a football team throughout one competitive season. In order to test if the measurements we collected were valid, we used computer modeling. Computer modeling is a set of mathematical equations and statistical packages which tell us how likely or how valid this clinical measurement is. We also looked at developing a computer model which can be used by coaches and sports science staff to give an indication of how likely that player is to develop injury. Therefore, if we are able to develop who is likely to get injury, we can remove them from the field of play and try prevent further subsequent injury. Additionally, it stops us from removing players from the field and therefore affecting their performance if they are not at risk of injury. Thank you.
I feel a dragging sensation below. I have difficulty weighing or can't control it. It has completely ruined my sex life. These are the words of women who suffer from pelvic organ prolapse. It's the downward descent of the female pelvic organs through the vaginal wall, a very common problem indeed, but poorly understood. It's been described as a silent epidemic. Last week, 800 women sued the NHS. It was on the BBC because the treatment they received, they weren't happy with it. The common treatments are ineffective and there's a high recurrence rate of 30%. Pelvic organ prolapse is very common, but we don't understand how it happens. So we sought to look at this by looking at the age of the collagen and the hormones, because it's commoner in older women as they age, and it's commoner in women attaining menopause. So we looked at the collagen age. We call this glycation. We studied a receptor of estrogen. Estrogen is a hormone that declines as women age. And we also looked at an antioxidant, GLO-1. This antioxidant is related to both age and estrogen. We studied these in both pregnancy and prolapse using methods for identifying specifically this compound and chemical separation techniques. We found consistently that in situations where the estrogen is low, there is a direct relationship with a high antioxidant. The antioxidant enzyme is higher and the collagen is older. In other words, low estrogen, high antioxidant, and more glycation, older collagen. We found this trend consistent in both prolapse and in pregnancy. From the images, you can see the trend, the images on the lower side of the screen. So in summary, we find that where estrogen expression is low, this could lead to less antioxidation within the pelvic tissue, and it could lead to glycation. Glycation changes the mechanical strength of the tissue. It changes how strong and resilient the tissue is, and this tissue can prolapse downward. Thank you.
It's a great pleasure to welcome Dr. Russell Crawford to the stage, who's going to reflect on his own experiences as an interdisciplinary researcher and think about what that means for the practice of interdisciplinary research. To introduce Russell, he is the academic developer of the Learning and Professional Development Centre here at Keele, and he's been at Keele for 10 years and is now Senior Teaching Fellow in the School of Medicine. I know Russ particularly because of the excellent work he does for Think, and Think is an interdisciplinary research network which is specifically focused on the activity of pedagogic research, and Russell is doing a lot of very important work in that area. So a great pleasure to welcome him this afternoon, and there's a wonderful image up there of cake, and his title is Researching My Cake and Eating It Too. Russ.
Thanks. Thank you very much. I always forget to do this, so I'll do it first. Thank you very much for having me here. You say that first, and then if they don't like it, they can't take it back at the other end. I thought I would try and do something a bit different. I'll go Jeremy Kyle for a start, so I'm free form because I will pace when I lecture, and I'm very worried about falling off this. If that happens, pretend it didn't happen, and I'll do the same, and then we'll be good. Right, so in my old life, before I became an academic, I was a tour guide in a whiskey distillery. And I don't drink, which has meant I was guaranteed the only employee that wasn't stealing off the company. And I thought, what I'm going to try and do is look at the history of interdisciplinarity for your guide. And what I would do is in the style of a tour. And so we're going to start our tour back in the depths of time, back in ancient Greece. Now you're looking at about 5,000 to 300 BC. And the interdisciplinarity as a concept hasn't been around that long. And what we were finding was that subjects, any subject, whether that was philosophy or medicine or any of the other subjects back at that time, were being compartmentalized. They were in disciplines. And even within those disciplines, they were subdivided into things like theory and practical and how productive they were. Nobody was really thinking across these different disciplines as they came along. Even the PhD, that Doctor of Philosophy, meant it was itself a doctorate in a discipline. It was not an interdisciplinary qualification in any way. Let's skip forward a little bit. We're looking at 300, very difficult to get music themed to this era. There wasn't a lot of MP3 players in 325 AD. But let's look back at the actual early Christianity. The concept of discipline as a word was actually used in a religious way to separate celestial or the informed or the chosen by the church in whatever way you wanted to do, and the non-initiated individual. And a massive big difference in there was the ability to read and write. And if you had the ability to read and write, chances are you were of a clerical persuasion, you were celestial, and that way you had this inference of power and knowledge and influence over the common people. And this is why when you say, well, my discipline is genetics, and you think, well, if your discipline is genetics, you must have knowledge on that. That knowledge infers power, and that power itself gives you influence, whether it's within your field or whether that's more generally with an impact on the audience. It was always specific knowledge, even at that time. It was always specific knowledge. The people who had the knowledge, the people who could read and write, the church, and even the government to a certain extent, were the gatekeepers. That was the power base behind that knowledge. But let's skip forward a little bit, and we're in 1640s to 1716, 17th century. We're looking at a German philosopher and mathematician, Gottfried Wilhelm Leibniz, and he revolutionized thinking at the time, because what he did was he proposed a concept of universal justice. And that was the very first inkling I could get in my own research of interdisciplinarity really bleeding through at the common level. Because what his idea of universal justice was concepts like linguistics, economics, even down to the last one there, sinology, which is the study of the Chinese culture. All of these things wrapped up together to give this conceptual framework of universal justice accessible to the common man. Now, as you can imagine, there was a lot of, at this point, there was universities, there was a lot of higher education institutes who were hooking onto this idea, but it still hadn't caught on. Skip ahead, we're in the Industrial Revolution. The microscope has already been invented a few hundred years ago. And what you've got is a technological evolution, a very, very quick, rapid turnover of discovery. And with that discovery came responsibility and the scientific method. It was no longer sufficient to have a belief that you were an expert in something. You had to have a conclusion and proof. And there was a burden of proof and rigor now taking part in the world at that time. Universities at the time were also big into this. Of course, they were still siloed in their disciplines, but they were looking at this scientific method to prove and to quantify any advancement in there. And it was considered at that time that individual disciplines were absolutely sufficient in universities, and that if you wanted to go down to a very specific level, you would join a scientific society of some description. And that wasn't to the exclusion of the humanities, they were just generally called scientific societies. What that meant was specialists, discipline specialists. And of course, it's very different today. Which brings us into the 20th century. The roaring 20s was where the actual term interdisciplinarity occurred. And a free banana for anybody who gets that music reference immediately. Now, there we go, there we go. One friend in the audience. As a term, interdisciplinarity only really appeared in about the 1920s. So before that, it may have been a concept, and it may have even been happening, but it wasn't widely known. And the purpose of it was to break out of the discipline boxes, the silos that all institutions, universities, society itself was putting itself in. And what interdisciplinarity is, if you try and define it, if you find a definition, is you're working in the gaps between those particular silos. And at that point, there's a really great undiscovered country, if you like, that sort of potential there. And then, of course, you can't give academics a definition or a word like interdisciplinarity without them putting their own spin on it. And so coming straight out of that was multidisciplinary and interdisciplinary, not the same things. What Gottfried Leibniz was doing back in the 1600s was multidisciplinary. He was recruiting specialists in different areas. What we're here today to discuss, and what I've seen a fantastic display of, is interdisciplinarity. And in extreme cases, and in some cases on these processes themselves, there's a potential for brand new areas of study. And I've picked out three because they're the craziest three I could come up with. There's tons of them. But meta-philosophy in the 1940s came into its own as a discipline, separate from philosophy. And what that is the study of the philosophy of philosophy. And that's only a philosopher were to go that redundant into the sentence. If there's any philosophers in the audience, you can hit me afterwards. Military psychology, another one. Because in the 1890s, there were so many wars, over so many periods of time, having such an effect, a whole subsection, a whole genre of psychology appeared that was gauged at military engagements, whether that's the traumatic bit at the other end, or whether that's the strategy going in. And then more recently, in the 70s, computational sociology. Two areas that wouldn't normally have a coffee together down in Chancellor's are all of a sudden generating a brand new field of study. So that brings the end, the tour aspect of the day, and the dog and pony show is finished, and we'll move on to the actual bit you might be interested in hearing about. The modern interpretation of interdisciplinarity takes on an aspirational tone. The minute you shift away from the history side, interdisciplinarity is always viewed, especially nowadays in the lexicon and the type of language they use, in an aspirational way. We create understanding. We have knowledge across concepts and worlds. We break down boundaries. You can see the thinking behind this. If they can see interdisciplinarity as a solution to certain types of problems, or to certain siloed thinking, you would want that to have an aspirational tone. But the core skill is still going deeper. The whole idea behind this is that the knowledge goes deeper the more interdisciplinary you get, because you have a great depth of knowledge in one discipline, a great depth of knowledge in another, and when you put them together, you can go even further. That's the aspirational content of that. But again, you've got to qualify that with that word meaningful at the end. It can't just be for its own sake. It has to have a direction. And I'll tell you why in the next slide. I'm going to get murdered for this. But there was no way I could come and talk to this audience in this context at this time without showing that. The Research and Development Wheel of Fun. It's not called the Research and Development Wheel of Fun. That's just what we call it in my office. However, I thought at first glance, I would look at this wheel and go, which parts of that wheel are interdisciplinary in their very nature? And I thought, well, immediately, 3 areas. The one on the left there, public engagement, of course it is. You're using a subset of very, very different skills when you're talking in the public about your research than you would be conducting the research. Interdisciplinary, you're using different skill sets. The 3-minute thesis was a prime example of that. Under very, very tightly regulated occurrences, you had to give a presentation to a lay audience in an informed way. Not a skill set that you need if you're only obsessed with doing the particular bit of genetics or doing the particular bit of research that you want to do. The other ones at the top are practical applications of my research. If you're successful in grants and you get to write impact statements for the Research Excellence Framework, which we all aspire to do, one of the things they'll ask you for is how does your research impact in a practical way into society? If you're working in a silo with your head down, with tunnel vision on, it's very difficult to make those claims, and that's a skill in itself to learn how to write that. But when I started to dig closer into the wheel, what I noticed is actually most of it is interdisciplinary. Most of it, if you look at it with a certain perspective, and certainly from your point of view, whether you're in first year or third year or fourth year of a part-time PhD, the interdisciplinarity aspects of this researcher development wheel is something you can't underestimate. And the reason you can't underestimate it is because you're facing documents like this one. This is the University of Edinburgh's checklist. Oh, I'm worried about that. University of Edinburgh's checklist of what makes good interdisciplinary research proposal for money. They will give a lot of money. We're talking tens of thousands of pounds to research proposals that are successful under this scheme. And look at the adjectives. The black text is just context. Look at the red words on there. They want to know why your work is interdisciplinary. Why does it even need to be? If you can't articulate that and you're just doing it because someone said it should be interdisciplinary, you need to think about that a little deeper. Second one there, how will they be integrated, these disciplines, together? That's a difficult question to answer. It's very straightforward to get a psychologist and a sociologist together and have a conversation and come up with an idea. But how does it help? What do you gain from that? And if you need to be able to quantify that gain, because you're applying for money, you're always going to be applying for money, and they want to know what the outcomes are. It's an investment. What's your strategy? You can't just dream up a sexy project. It's got to have a strategy, and it's got to sound reasonable. What are the skills that the researchers have? And this is where that researcher development wheel comes in. You can then go around that wheel and say, these are the interdisciplinary skills. That self-awareness is something that I would urge you not to underestimate. That self-awareness in a researcher is a key prospect for being successful longer term. You've got to have a clear plan. You've got to be able to outline the benefits. And then how, again, they've come back to this. They already asked that question up there. How is the interdisciplinarity helping? If any time you look at what are the pros and cons of going interdisciplinary with a collaboration, with a conversation, with work today, you've got to look at the benefits and what they are in real terms. And there's no way I go anywhere without the what's in it for me answers. So what is the benefits of interdisciplinary collaboration and research? The first one is motivation. It motivates. There's nothing more exciting. I've been to many conferences this year, every year. And I've never heard conversation like I heard about an hour ago over there. Because people get talking about other things, the weather, the weekend, or I haven't seen you in ages. But over there, the conversation was all, what are you doing? That's really exciting. Well, actually, that gives me an idea for what I'm doing. The motivation to keep there. This is why I'm so happy there's so many of you here at the end of the day. Usually at conferences, especially ones that I've been at in other countries, when it finishes at coffee time and there's an hour left and some boring guy's going to stand up and speak, they don't know there's a tour coming, and so half the people leave. That didn't happen today because you were motivated to stay. Depth. Here's the big plus with interdisciplinarity. You get a depth you cannot get with a discipline alone. Now that depth may be valuable or not, and it's up to you to articulate it, but you definitely get access to a depth of rigor on that research that wasn't there before. Knowledge gain is obvious. If you bring a sociologist and a psychologist together, you have two potential mindsets, two potential literature bases to dig into, one of which can be synergistic with the other. Flexibility. Difficult to find images to convey flexibility that aren't from the 1980s. But a flexibility is a good one because, again, learning theory in one thing, research theory in one instance is novel in another. What's blasé in one silo is completely novel in another. And some of the biggest discoveries that were ever made were done using these techniques, using this idea of we never considered how criminal sociology could help genetic discovery. And yet, ideas like that are coming forward, and the people that drive them are the ones that are succeeding. That one, bit abstract, transferability. The skill set that you get by being an interdisciplinary researcher is the transferability to say that actually it doesn't matter if the next discipline I collaborate with is psychology or chemistry or medicine. I have a core skill set that I'm confident in. Again, back to that researcher development wheel and where you fit in there as you develop. Creativity is obvious, ideas, concepts, theory. My own degree is the biosciences, so it was all proteins and molecules and chemical reactions and things you could measure. And then as an interdisciplinary aspect, we hired a geneticist into the lab. The minute that geneticist joined the lab, among 8 biochemists who were so bored of each other talking because we all knew exactly the same things, we had a different strand, and within 6 months we had new projects, new ideas, new funding opportunities. Never underestimate novelty. Interdisciplinarity lends itself very well to novelty as a concept. If you've got a novel idea, think of it from a reviewer's point of view on a paper. For a referee, that maybe a referee that isn't well disposed to reading, I don't really want to be reading this paper today, but I've got to. You give them a paper that's interdisciplinary in nature, that leverages the novelty, you've got one less hostile reviewer to worry about. They haven't got the skill base to poke holes in it the same way, as long as your data collection and your reporting and your methods are rigorous, which they would be. You can use novelty to your advantage. So I'm sensing a tone in the audience, and you're sort of there, nearly, but they're still needing more reasons. So let's bundle all those next reasons together, rather than one at a time. Communication skills, as evidenced today. Collaboration, hopefully one of the outputs of today. Opportunity, definitely an output of today, because that's what my next slide is. The reputation of yourself, of the people you represent. Every single person I talked to over there told me who they were, but also told me who they worked with. And that immediately had a reputational impact on my perception of who they worked with. Now, that may be unintended, it may have been intended, but it happened, and it's something you need to factor in. Impact. Don't underestimate impact. Novelty can contribute to that. Interdisciplinary research is innovative by its nature, and if you can quantify that and measure it and prove it, you're golden. And funding opportunities. Grant bodies like new things. They get bored reading the same type of applications year in, year out. So if you come at them with a novel idea, I've seen this happen, you're more likely to get your funding. All of this is leading into my final point, and I thank you for sticking with me as long as you have. One of the outputs of today is to write for our institutional learning and teaching journal, because it is a contractual obligation of anyone in the LPDC who gives a talk anywhere to mention this journal. Okay, it's important. It's important to me, but it's also important to you, because this journal has an ISSN number, which means it's recognized as an actual peer-reviewed journal. When you get your work, not if, you get your work published in it, we're going to collect all of the work, and hopefully you'll do some writing towards this special edition of Jade that we're putting together with Joe. When you start to get that work put into the institutional repository, you can then start using it in your CVs, you can use it for your own development. It's also a great opportunity to try your hand at writing for journals that are peer-reviewed, and then go elsewhere and aim a little higher than that. Types of things you want to write, well, the archetypal article would be about 500 to 800 words. You can go more if you want. We're online only, so I'm not worried about word limits, but we can go shorter as well if you've got something more abstract, something more reflective to type that you don't really have the space or the inclination to go on too much about. Timescales for you, well, the special edition is going to be released in July in 2017, which means your submission deadline, and I'm emphasizing the dead in deadline, that is, there's no wiggle room on that, is Monday the 29th of May. Thank you for your attention. I hope it's not been too bad an afternoon, but again, I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.